The crystal vase hit the wall and shattered. Tiny glass pieces went everywhere across the fancy penthouse floor. The woman grabbed her purse, backing away like she'd seen a ghost. Her hands were shaking so bad she could barely hold her things. "I'm sorry, Kong SSI," she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "You're rich, you're handsome, but I just can't do this. When I look in your eyes, it's like staring into winter. Just cold and empty." She practically ran to the door and was gone. Kong Juneseo didn't move. He just stood there, another expensive whiskey in his hand, watching another woman leave. That made 9 in the last 4 months. 9 women who came to his luxury apartment excited to meet him, and 9 who left looking scared. He walked to the window and looked out at the Seoul skyline. All those lights. All those buildings. So many of them connected to his business empire. And here he was, 34 years old, with everything money could buy and completely alone. Again. I know, you're wondering what could possibly make 9 different women run from one of Seoul's most eligible bachelors. But we move forward. If you're new here, I share stories that'll make your jaw drop. So do me a quick favor, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Juneseo's phone rang. He looked at the screen and sighed. Park Sung-ho, his right-hand man. "Chairman, the Busan shipment has a problem. The port officials are asking questions. And the Japanese investors moved the meeting to tomorrow." "There. Handle it," Juneseo said, ending the call. He poured himself another drink. The organization could survive one night without him. Right now, he couldn't deal with business. Not after what just happened. He thought about what all those women had said as they left. "There's something in your eyes that scares me. The way you look at me makes me feel cold inside. It's like you're looking through me, not at me. And now, like staring into winter." 3 days ago, he'd actually gone to a doctor about it. Not that he'd tell anyone that. "Physically, you're perfectly healthy, Mr. Kong," Dr. Kim had told him. "Nothing wrong with you at all." "Then why does everyone leave?" Juneseo had asked quietly. The doctor had taken off his glasses and sighed. "Some people just carry darkness differently, Mr. Kong. It's not what you say. It's what you don't say. It's not what you do. It's what you've seen." Now, standing in his bathroom, Juneseo stared at himself in the mirror. Nice suit. Good haircut. Handsome face. Nothing scary there. But his eyes, were they really so cold? Did they really show nothing? Was he really the monster everyone saw? His phone buzzed with a text. Sung-ho again. "Chairman, we found someone perfect for the Hanam-dong estate position. Something tells me she's different." Juneseo put down his phone. Different wouldn't matter. Different would still see the winter and run. They all did, eventually. Juneseo sat behind his massive desk in Kong Tower, the tallest building in Gangnam. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed off Seoul's business district, but he wasn't looking at the view. His attention was fixed on the parade of people coming through his door. For the past 2 hours, he'd been interviewing staff for his new mansion in Hanam-dong. The historic property had 27 rooms and needed a full household team. So far, it wasn't going well. "Next," he said after dismissing a chef who couldn't stop his hands from shaking. Sung-ho, standing by the door, checked his tablet. 7 more applicants, Chairman. Juneseo nodded, face blank. Each interview followed the same pattern. They'd walk in confident, meet his eyes, and something would change. Their voices would get quieter. They'd look at the floor instead of at him. By the end, they just wanted to escape. A housekeeper nearly dropped her folder when he asked about her experience. A gardener stuttered so badly Juneseo could barely understand him. A driver with military experience actually took a step back when Juneseo stood up to shake his hand. "This is pointless," Juneseo said, loosening his tie. Nobody will last a week. One more before we break for lunch, Sung-ho insisted. The American. Jun Seo raised an eyebrow. American? Before Sung-ho could answer, the door opened. Azira Thorne walked in like she owned the building. She wore a simple black blazer and pants, nothing flashy, but they fit her perfectly. Her natural hair was styled in neat twists, and she carried a leather portfolio instead of the manila folders everyone else had brought. But it was her eyes that caught Jun Seo's attention. They met his directly, without hesitation. Mr. Kong, she said, crossing the room with steady steps. Thank you for seeing me. I'm Azira Thorne. Her handshake was firm. Not aggressive, not timid. Just confident. Sit, Jun Seo said, more a command than an invitation. She did, placing her portfolio on her lap, back straight but relaxed. No nervous fidgeting. Your resume, Sung-ho said, is impressive but unusual. You've worked for the Harrington family in New York, the Westbrooks in D.C., and the Changs in Singapore. Yes, she replied simply. All very wealthy families, Jun Seo noted, watching her carefully. All very demanding families, she corrected with a slight smile. There's often overlap. Jun Seo leaned forward slightly. Most people leaned back when he did this. She didn't move. Why Korea? He asked. I've always been interested in Korean culture. I spent 3 years learning the language. And I believe in going where opportunities take you. There's a gap, Sung-ho interrupted, scrolling through his tablet. 8 months between the Westbrooks and the Changs. Care to explain? Personal time, she said without hesitation. Family matters that needed my attention. Sung-ho looked skeptical. For 8 months? Some family matters take time, Mr. Park. Jun Seo studied her. Most people would be nervous explaining a gap to potential employers. She seemed completely unbothered. The position requires discretion, Jun Seo said. I have business associates visit regularly. Conversations happen that shouldn't leave the property. I understand confidentiality, Mr. Kong. I've worked for people who value their privacy. And what about security protocols? Background checks on your friends? Limited phone usage? Restrictions on visitors? She met his gaze steadily. Are you trying to scare me, Mr. Kong? The room went silent. Sung-ho's eyes widened slightly. Nobody spoke to the chairman that way. But instead of anger, Jun Seo felt something else. Interest. I've worked for difficult men, Mr. Kong, Azira continued calmly. There's a difference between respect and fear. I offer one, not the other. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jun Seo reached for his water glass. He looked directly at her as he let it slip from his fingers. The glass hit the desk and tipped over, water spilling across the polished surface and dripping onto the floor. The other applicants had panicked when he'd done this. Apologized for his mistake. Scrambled for tissues. Looked terrified they'd be blamed. Azira simply reached into her portfolio, pulled out a handkerchief, and calmly began blotting the water. To answer your earlier question, she said as she cleaned, I'm fine with security protocols. My social life isn't particularly exciting, and I value my privacy as well. Though I hope your water dropping test isn't a regular occurrence. She glanced up at him, and there was something almost like amusement in her eyes. And for the first time in what felt like years, Jun Seo felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. Not quite a smile. But close. When can you start? He asked. I'm available immediately, she replied, folding the damp handkerchief neatly. Tomorrow, then. Sung-ho will handle the details. She nodded, gathering her things. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Kong. As she walked to the door, Jun Seo noticed something else unusual. Her posture hadn't changed from when she entered. No relief at escaping. No hurry to leave. Just the same steady confidence. When the door closed behind her, Sung-ho turned to him. "Chairman, shouldn't we complete the interviews?" "No need. She'll do. But we know almost nothing about her." "Then find out," Jun Seo said, looking at the space where she had been. "Run a complete background check. Find out what's in those missing 8 months." Sung-ho nodded, already typing on his tablet. "Already on it, Chairman." "But there's something else. Her previous employer in New York? Mr. Harrington? He was found dead 3 weeks after she left." Jun Seo turned, his almost smile fading completely. "What?" Azira stood outside her temporary studio apartment, one small suitcase beside her. Rain drizzled from a gray Seoul sky as she waited for the car that would take her to her new job. The building behind her was decent but simple, the kind of place foreign workers lived when first moving to Korea. Her phone buzzed. A sleek black car was pulling up to the curb. The driver got out, bowed slightly. "Miss Thorne? I'm here to take you to the Hanam-dong residence." 20 minutes later, the car passed through massive iron gates and rolled up a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed trees. Azira tried not to look impressed, but it was hard not to be. The mansion was huge, a beautiful mix of traditional Korean architecture and modern luxury. Stone walls, curved tile roofs, and massive windows that reflected the cloudy sky. "Wow," she whispered to herself. The driver heard her. "The chairman's newest property. One of the oldest estates in Hanam-dong. They say it was once owned by royalty." Azira nodded. From a tiny apartment to a palace in less than half an hour. Talk about a change. Inside, Mrs. Kim, the housekeeper, was waiting. She was a small woman in her 50s with a perpetually nervous expression. "I will show you around," she said in careful English before switching to Korean. "The chairman is very particular about how things are done." The tour took nearly an hour. 27 rooms filled with expensive furniture, antiques, and art. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Like a museum no one actually lived in. "These are the other staff," Mrs. Kim said as they entered the kitchen. The chef bowed silently. The gardener nodded from where he sat drinking tea. The security guard gave a quick nod. None of them smiled. None of them made eye contact for more than a second. "The chairman, does he live here full-time?" Azira asked. Mrs. Kim's eyes widened slightly. "He comes and goes. Sometimes stays for days. Sometimes just for hours. We always must be ready." "And when will he arrive today?" "Late. Business in Gangnam. Always business." Mrs. Kim's voice dropped to a whisper. "When he is here, it's best to be invisible. Do your work. Don't speak unless spoken to." Azira nodded but said nothing. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting. "This is your room," Mrs. Kim said, opening a door on the second floor. It was simple but elegant. A full-sized bed with crisp white sheets. A small desk. A private bathroom. Far nicer than her apartment. "Thank you," Azira said. "Rest today. Tomorrow, we show you your duties." If you're enjoying this story so far, take 2 seconds to hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it helps more than you know. And drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Now, back to our mysterious maid. The next morning, Azira started work at 6 a.m. She dusted priceless artifacts. Polished floors that already gleamed. Arranged fresh flowers in rooms no one used. What she didn't see were any personal touches. No family photos. No books left open. No favorite coffee mugs. Nothing that said a real person lived here. At 11 a.m., she noticed the security cameras. Small, discreet, but everywhere. In that moment, she felt eyes on her. Someone watching. In his office at Kong Tower, Jun Seo sat at his desk, a small monitor to his right showing security feeds from the mansion. His eyes kept drifting to the image of Azira moving through the house. There was something about the way she carried herself. No rushed movements. No nervous glances. Just calm efficiency. The Tokyo partners are waiting, Chairman, Sung-ho reminded him. Junesio switched off the monitor and straightened his tie. 4 men in expensive suits stood when he entered the conference room. Yamamoto-san, Junesio bowed slightly. Thank you for coming all this way. The meeting was tense. The Japanese partners wanted more control of the shipping routes. Junesio refused to give it. The Busan situation is nearly resolved, he said coolly. My people are handling it. 3 dock workers dead is not handled, Yamamoto countered. Those responsible have been dealt with, Junesio's voice was ice. It won't happen again. After they left, Sung-ho handed him a folder. The background check on Azira Thorne. Junesio flipped through it. And the 8-month gap? Still looking. She's careful about her digital footprint. As for Harrington's death, police ruled it a heart attack. Nothing suspicious. Junesio nodded, unconvinced. Keep digging. Back at the mansion, Azira worked her way through the 2nd floor. She tried a door at the end of the hall. Locked. Not that one, Mrs. Kim appeared behind her. The chairman keeps it locked always. No one goes in. Not even to clean. What's in there? Mrs. Kim shook her head. Private things. Personal things. Later, when everyone was busy with dinner preparations, Azira returned to the locked door. From her hair, she removed a small pin. A few careful movements, and the lock clicked open. The room was a study. Smaller than the others. More lived in. Books lined the walls. A worn leather chair sat beside a reading lamp. And there, on the desk, a single photograph in a simple frame. A young boy, maybe 12, standing beside an older man with the same eyes. Both serious. Neither smiling. But the man's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. Azira studied it carefully. Then froze at a sound from the hall. Quickly, she slipped out, locking the door behind her. That evening, storm clouds gathered over Seoul. Lightning flashed across the darkening sky as rain pounded against the windows. Azira was in the library, dusting shelves of books that looked like they'd never been opened. You like Hemingway? She turned, startled. Junesio stood in the doorway, his suit jacket gone, tie loosened. His hair was damp from the rain. Chairman, she bowed slightly. I didn't hear you come in. You didn't answer my question. He nodded toward the book in her hand. I do, actually, she said, looking at the copy of The Old Man and the Sea she'd been dusting. Though I prefer his short stories. Which one? Hills Like White Elephants, she said without hesitation. The whole story happens in the spaces between what's said. Something flickered across Junesio's face. Interest, maybe. You've actually read them. Is that surprising? Most people just pretend to like the classics. Thunder boomed outside. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. What about you? Azira asked. Do you prefer the novels or the short stories? Mrs. Kim, passing in the hall, nearly dropped her tray when she heard Azira questioning the chairman so casually. But Junesio didn't seem angry. He stepped into the room, looking at the shelves. A clean, well-lighted place, he said finally. A story about nothing and everything. Azira nodded. About loneliness. And the nod a prayer. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The mansion didn't feel quite so silent anymore. You should get back to work, he said, but without coldness. Yes, Chairman. She returned the book to the shelf and walked past him. Azira, he called after her. She turned. Mrs. Kim says you reorganized the linen closets. It's more efficient now. Just doing my job, sir. He nodded once, dismissing her. As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her. Not cold like winter anymore. More like early spring, still cool, but with the possibility of thaw. Later that night, in her room, Azira sat on the edge of her bed. The storm had passed. Moonlight filtered through the window. She pulled out a phone, not her regular one, but a second, slim device with encryption software. She dialed a number. "Yes, I'm in," she said quietly. "He trusts no one, but he's not what we expected. I don't think he knows about the connection." She listened to the voice on the other end. "I need more time," she insisted. "This isn't simple." After hanging up, she reached under her shirt and pulled out a locket on a thin gold chain. She clicked it open. Inside was half of a torn photograph. A man's face, half visible. The exact same man who stood beside young Jun Seo in the photograph in the locked room. A month had passed since Azira started working at the mansion. Little things had changed. Fresh flowers appeared in rooms that were once sterile. Music played softly in the kitchen where before there was only tense silence. The staff still moved carefully, but they no longer looked like they were walking on glass. Jun Seo noticed all of it. He found himself coming home more often, finding excuses to work from the mansion's study rather than his Gangnam office. He told himself it was to keep an eye on things, on her, but the truth was more complicated. This morning, he stood at his bedroom window, watching Azira in the garden below. She was speaking with the gardener, pointing to different areas. The old man was actually smiling. Jun Seo couldn't remember ever seeing him smile before. His phone rang. "Sung-ho." "I'll be there in an hour," Jun Seo said, turning from the window. "Actually, Chairman, I'm already here." At the mansion. 10 minutes later, they walked the grounds, Sung-ho's voice low with concern. "She's changing things, sir. Routines, schedules, staff dynamics. The house runs more efficiently now," Jun Seo said. "Yes, but security protocols are being relaxed. The staff used to avoid certain areas. Now they move freely. She's got them eating meals together. Talking. Is that a problem?" "It could be. People who talk share information. And we still don't know everything about her. The background check has gaps." Jun Seo stopped walking. "It's been a month, Sung-ho. If she meant harm, wouldn't she have done something by now?" "Not necessarily. Some people play the long game." Sung-ho hesitated. "There's something else. You're different around her." "What does that mean?" "You talk to her. You look at her. You notice things." "I notice everything. Not like this." Sung-ho looked uncomfortable. "It's not my place to say, but..." Jun Seo's phone rang again, saving Sung-ho from finishing his thought. The screen showed a name that made Jun Seo's expression harden instantly. "Choi," he answered, voice cold. "This better be important." He listened, his face growing darker with each second. "When?" he demanded. "How many men?" "No. No police. Send our people. Secure the warehouse first. I don't care how you do it. Anyone who resists doesn't walk away." He ended the call, jaw tight with tension. "The Incheon situation?" Sung-ho asked. "The Hwang organization is moving on our territory. They hit one of our storage facilities at the port. Casualties? 2 of our men. Hospitalized but alive. They need to understand who they're dealing with." "I'll handle it personally," Sung-ho said. "No. I'm going. They need to see my face." Jun Seo turned toward the house. "Have the car ready in 20 minutes. Inside, he went to his study to retrieve documents. He didn't notice Azira dusting nearby until he was already halfway through his call with the head of security. "I want names," he said into the phone. "Everyone involved. Family members. Addresses. We send a message they won't forget. He glanced up, suddenly aware of her presence. She continued working, seemingly unaffected by his words. Do what needs to be done, he finished, ending the call. For a moment, the room was silent. He waited for her to hurry away like the others would have done. Instead, she simply moved to the next shelf, calmly continuing her task. You heard that, he said. Not a question. Yes. And you have nothing to say? Azira turned to look at him. Your business is your business, Mr. Kong. I don't judge people for surviving. Her response caught him off guard. Before he could reply, his frustration got the better of him. He slammed his hand down on the desk, not seeing the small crystal paperweight until it was too late. The crystal cracked, a sharp edge slicing into his palm. Damn it, he muttered, pulling back his hand. Blood welled up across his palm, dripping onto important documents. Azira moved immediately, pulling a clean handkerchief from her pocket. Without hesitation, without asking permission, she took his hand in hers. Everyone else in the house avoided touching him. Avoided getting too close. But she held his hand firmly, pressing the cloth against the wound. It's not deep, she said, examining the cut. But it needs cleaning. June Seo stood perfectly still, hyper-aware of her fingers against his skin. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with such casual confidence. First aid kit, she asked. Bathroom. Cabinet. She led him there, still holding his hand. In the large marble bathroom, she sat him on the edge of the tub while she found antiseptic and bandages. This will sting, she warned, applying alcohol to the cut. He didn't flinch. As she carefully wrapped his hand, he found himself asking the question that had been bothering him for weeks. Why aren't you afraid of me? Azira's hands paused briefly, then continued their work. Should I be? Everyone else is. I'm not everyone else. She secured the bandage with medical tape. Besides, I grew up with a grandfather who survived things that would break most men. Your coldness? I felt colder. She stood back to examine her work. Keep it clean. Change the bandage tomorrow. June Seo looked at his wrapped hand, then at her. What things? What? What did your grandfather survive? Something flickered across her face. Sadness? Caution? War. Loss. Starting over in a country that didn't want him. She began putting away the first aid supplies. He taught me that fear is a choice. And it's rarely the most useful one. Before June Seo could ask more, the door opened. Sung-ho stood there, his expression urgent. The car's ready, Chairman. And, we need to talk. Immediately. June Seo nodded. Thank you, Azira. That will be all. She bowed slightly and left the room. When they were alone, Sung-ho handed him a folder. Chairman, we found something. The 8 months she was traveling? She was in Seoul. And you're not going to believe who she was meeting with. It was past midnight when Azira heard the knock on her bedroom door. The chairman wants to see you in his study. Now. She knew this moment would come eventually. Taking a deep breath, she put on a robe over her pajamas and followed the security guard down the dark hallway. The house was silent except for their footsteps. Outside, the moon hung full and bright, casting long shadows through the windows. June Seo was standing at his desk when she entered. He didn't look up. His bandaged hand rested on a pile of photographs spread across the polished wood. Close the door, he said, voice calm but cold. She did. The soft click echoed in the quiet room. Explain these. He finally looked up, pushing the photos toward her. Azira stepped forward and looked down. Her heart sank. The photos showed her sitting in various cafes around Seoul with an elderly Korean man. Some were from months ago. Others from just weeks before she started working at the mansion. You weren't traveling those 8 months, Junesio said. You were here. In Seoul. Meeting with Park Jin-woo. He watched her face, looking for fear, for guilt. She showed neither. Yes, she said simply. Do you know who he is? I do. He was my father's business partner for 20 years. Azira nodded. I know. Junesio's jaw tightened. So you came here to what? Spy on me? Get information? Use whatever you find against me or my organization? No. Then explain. Now. Azira took a deep breath. My grandfather, James Thorne, fought in the Korean War. He was a medic with the American forces. He saved a young Korean soldier's life during the Battle of Incheon. That soldier was Park Jin-woo. Junesio's expression didn't change, but she could see he was listening carefully. They stayed in touch for years after the war, she continued. Letters, mostly. My grandfather never talked much about it, but after he died 3 years ago, I found the letters. Jin-woo's name was in them. That doesn't explain why you're in my house. 8 months ago, Jin-woo contacted me. He'd heard about my grandfather's death and wanted to meet. He said there were things I should know. About my family. About his past. About your family. Junesio's eyes narrowed. What things? That's what I came to find out. She met his gaze steadily. Jin-woo told me about your father. About the organization. About what happened 15 years ago. Something flashed across Junesio's face. Pain, quickly masked. What do you know about 15 years ago? His voice was dangerously quiet. I know that's when your father died. I know Jin-woo left the organization right after. And I know something happened that changed you forever. Junesio walked to the window, his back to her. Moonlight outlined his silhouette. So you lied your way into my home to, what, investigate me? For revenge? For money? For truth, Azira said. Jin-woo believes there's more to your father's death than you know. He's been afraid to come forward for years. He thought I might be able to help. By deceiving me? Junesio turned, anger finally showing through. By pretending to be someone you're not. I am who I say I am. Everything in my resume is true. I did work for those families. I do need this job. The only thing I left out was why I came to Korea in the first place. We're just getting started. If you're still with me and haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button right now and join our storytelling family. Let me know in the comments if you saw this revelation coming. Now, let's see how Junesio reacts. For a long moment, the room was silent. Junesio looked at the photographs again, his eyes lingering on the image of Jin-woo's face. You should have been honest from the beginning. Would you have hired me if I told you I'd been meeting with your father's old partner? The man who walked away from the organization right after his death. Junesio didn't answer. They both knew the answer. What did Jin-woo tell you about my father's death? He finally asked. Not much. Just that he doesn't believe it was suicide, like the official report said. Junesio's head snapped up. He told you it was suicide? Isn't that what happened? Something dark passed across his face. Is that what the world believes? That Kang Min-ho took his own life? Azira watched him carefully. That's not what happened. I found him, Junesio said quietly, almost to himself. In his study. Much like this one. I was 19. Home from university for the weekend. He touched his bandaged hand, the one she had wrapped earlier. There was glass everywhere. Broken. Like someone had fought. And my father. He stopped, his voice catching slightly. His eyes were open. But empty. Like all the light had gone out. Azira stepped closer, sensing this was the first time he'd spoken these words aloud in years. The police said suicide. Clean. Simple. No investigation needed. Everyone nodded and moved on. His voice hardened. Except I knew my father. He wouldn't leave me alone like that. Not without warning. Not without a reason. You think he was murdered, Azira said quietly. I know he was. But I could never prove it. And Jin Woo, the one person who might have known something, disappeared the next day. Wouldn't take my calls. Wouldn't see me. Jun Seo looked at her with new intensity. Until you. The accusation hung in the air between them. I didn't know, Azira said. Jin Woo never told me you suspected murder. He just said there were things about your father's death that didn't add up. That's why I took this job. To find out the truth. For both of us. Jun Seo studied her face. Why should I believe you now? Because I could have denied everything. Made excuses. Instead, I'm telling you the truth, even though it might cost me this job. Maybe worse. He stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the pain in his eyes he was trying to hide. If you came for information, just ask, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. I'm tired of being seen as a monster. Tired of people looking at me and seeing only winter. Something shifted between them in that moment. The air felt different. Lighter somehow, despite the heavy conversation. I don't see a monster when I look at you, Azira said. I see someone carrying too much for too long. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she touched his face gently. Looking into your eyes isn't like winter, she said. It's like looking at someone who's been left out in the cold too long. Jun Seo froze at her touch. No one touched him like this. With gentleness. Without fear or agenda. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to respond. Then his phone rang, breaking the silence. He stepped back, reaching for it. It's Sung-ho, he said, then answered. What is it? It's late. Azira watched his face change as he listened. First confusion, then shock, then something close to fear. When? He demanded. How bad? We'll be right there. He hung up, turning to her with urgency. Jin Woo has been attacked in his home. He's in the hospital. Critical condition. Azira's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Who would? That's not all, Jun Seo said grimly. Before he lost consciousness, he said one name to the paramedics. Their eyes met. Azira. The hospital corridors blurred as Jun Seo and Azira rushed through them. It was nearly 2 a.m., but Severance Hospital never truly slept. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, barely glancing at them as they passed. Jun Seo's security team was different. They watched Azira with open suspicion, eyes narrowed and hands hovering near concealed weapons. They'd arrived ahead of them, securing the hospital wing as soon as Jin Woo was brought in. Chairman, one nodded respectfully to Jun Seo before giving Azira a cold stare. Should she really be here? Yes, Jun Seo said firmly, leaving no room for argument. They reached the intensive care unit where a doctor was waiting. His face was grim. Mr. Park was attacked in his home, the doctor explained. Blunt force trauma to the head, multiple broken ribs, punctured lung. We've stabilized him, but he's unconscious. The next 24 hours are critical. Will he survive? Jun Seo asked directly. It's too soon to tell. When will he wake up? If he wakes up. The doctor emphasized that if, it could be hours or days. I need to see him, Azira said. The doctor looked to Jun Seo for approval, which he gave with a slight nod. Jin Woo looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines. Bandages covered his head. Tubes ran from his nose and arms. The steady beep of heart monitors filled the otherwise silent room. Azira moved to his bedside, gently taking his hand. Tears filled her eyes. I'm so sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. Junesio watched from the doorway. Why would he say your name? He was trying to warn me, she said softly. Or trying to tell you to protect me. Or both. Explain. Everything. No more half-truths. Azira nodded, still holding Jinwoo's hand. My grandfather was stationed in Korea during the war. His unit was trapped during a firefight near Incheon. Jinwoo was a young Korean soldier fighting alongside the Americans. When my grandfather was hit, Jinwoo carried him to safety under heavy fire. They both should have died that day. Junesio moved closer, his eyes on Jinwoo's face. They stayed in touch over the years, Azira continued. Letters mostly. Jinwoo even visited America once, when I was very young. I barely remember it. After my grandfather died, I found all their correspondence. Jinwoo had been trying to reach him for years, but my grandfather had been sick, and the letters went unopened. What did the letters say? That's why I came to Korea. The last few were strange. Jinwoo wrote about history repeating itself and needing to make things right. He mentioned your father's name. And yours. Junesio's jaw tightened. And you didn't think to tell me this from the beginning? I tried to contact Jinwoo directly first. When we met, he seemed scared. Paranoid. He told me your father didn't kill himself, but he wouldn't tell me what really happened. Said it was too dangerous. That people were still watching. So you decided to spy on me instead. I decided to find out for myself what kind of man you were before I trusted you with any of this, Azira countered. Jinwoo warned me that getting close to the Kong organization could be dangerous. Well, he was right about that, Junesio said grimly, looking at the unconscious old man. A nurse entered to check Jinwoo's vitals, and they stepped out into the hallway. You still haven't explained why you lied to get a job in my house, Junesio said once they were alone. Jinwoo suggested it. He said working in your home would be the safest way to make contact. That you'd never speak to me otherwise. And now he's barely alive. Calling your name. Junesio's eyes hardened. Convenient timing. You think I had something to do with this? Azira's voice rose slightly. Why would I attack the one person who could tell me the truth about why I'm here? Before he could answer, memories flooded Junesio's mind. Walking into his father's study 15 years ago. The overturned furniture. Broken glass everywhere. And his father, slumped in his chair, eyes open but seeing nothing. Blood pooling beneath him. The police calling it suicide despite the obvious signs of struggle. Everyone accepting it without question. And Jinwoo, his father's closest friend and partner, disappearing the next day. Junesio? Azira's voice pulled him back to the present. She'd used his first name for the first time. The familiarity should have angered him. Instead, it anchored him. My father didn't kill himself, he said quietly. He was murdered. And Jinwoo knew something about it. That's why he ran. Or maybe he ran because he was afraid the same thing would happen to him, Azira suggested. The elevator doors opened, and Sung-ho hurried toward them, tablet in hand. Chairman, he bowed slightly. We got the security footage from Jinwoo's apartment building. They moved to a small waiting room where Sung-ho connected his tablet to a larger screen. The grainy footage showed 3 men entering Jinwoo's building. They wore caps pulled low, faces turned away from cameras. Professional, Junesio noted. They knew where the cameras were. The footage jumped to them leaving 20 minutes later. No rush. No panic. Just calm efficiency. These aren't street thugs, Sung-ho said. This was a hit. Organized. Can you identify them? Working on it. But there's something else. Sung-ho pulled up another image. This car was parked outside Jinwoo's building for 3 days before the attack. We traced the license plate. The screen showed a black sedan. It belongs to the Hyun organization. Jun Seo's expression darkened. Young Hyun's people. Who's Young Hyun? Azira asked. My father's rival, Jun Seo said. They fought over territory for years. After my father died, Young backed off. We've had an uneasy peace since then. Until now, Sung-ho added. Why would he come after Jin-woo after all this time? Jun Seo wondered aloud. Maybe because Jin-woo was talking to me, Azira said quietly. Maybe he was ready to tell the truth about what happened 15 years ago. Jun Seo turned to her, studying her face. The moment of decision had come. Either he trusted her, or he didn't. Either she was somehow involved in all this, or she was caught in the same web he was. If you're lying to me. He began. I'm not. Azira reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, holding it out to him. Here. My phone. The password is 7294. My email password is the same. My second phone is in my room, taped under the bedside table. The key to my apartment is in my wallet. Take it all. Check everything. Her directness surprised him. I came here for answers about my family's past, she continued, her voice steady. I stayed because I saw something in you no one else seems to see. And what's that? He asked quietly. Pain, she said simply. The kind that doesn't heal because you never let anyone close enough to see it. For a moment, the hospital seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, standing in the harsh fluorescent light, a decision hanging between them. Jun Seo reached out, but instead of taking the phone, he gently pushed her hand back. Keep it, he said. I believe you. Sung-ho looked shocked. Chairman, I strongly advise. I said I believe her, Jun Seo repeated firmly. The tension in Azira's shoulders eased slightly. Thank you. One of the security guards approached urgently. Sir, we have movement outside. 2 cars just pulled up. 4 men watching the main entrance. Sung-ho checked the security feed on his tablet. His face paled. Chairman, those are Hyun's men. Jun Seo moved to the window, carefully looking down at the street below. His jaw tightened as he recognized one of the men standing beside a black sedan. They're not here for Jin-woo, he said grimly, turning back to Azira. They're here for both of us. This way, Jun Seo whispered, guiding Azira through the dim hospital basement. The service tunnels smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts to move quietly. Behind them, Sung-ho was creating a distraction, sending security teams in different directions while falsely informing Hyun's men that Jun Seo had already left through the main entrance. Where are we going? Azira asked, staying close behind him. Somewhere they won't look. They emerged through a maintenance door into an alley where a nondescript gray sedan waited. No driver. Nothing fancy that would draw attention. Get in, Jun Seo said, opening the passenger door for her before sliding into the driver's seat. As they pulled away from the hospital, Azira glanced back. Will Jin-woo be safe? Sung-ho's leaving 2 men to watch him. But I don't think he's their target anymore. Then what do they want? Jun Seo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. To finish what they started 15 years ago. They drove in tense silence through Seoul's empty 3 a.m. streets. Instead of heading toward Gangnam or Hanam-dong, Jun Seo took them north, into an older neighborhood with narrow streets and modest apartment buildings. We can't go back to the mansion, he explained. If Hyun's people found Jin-woo, they might know about you being there. All my known properties will be watched. So where are we going? Somewhere off the books. 30 minutes later, they pulled into a small parking garage beneath an unremarkable apartment building in Songbuk-dong. Nothing about it suggested that one of Seoul's most powerful men would have any connection to the place. The apartment was on the 4th floor. Small, but clean and simply furnished. A living room with a couch and TV. A tiny kitchen. One bedroom visible through a half-open door. No one knows about this place, Jun Seo said, locking the door behind them. I bought it under a different name years ago. For emergencies. Azira looked around. Unlike his mansion or penthouse, this place felt lived in. Books stacked by the couch. A coffee mug in the sink. A jacket thrown over a chair. You actually stay here, she realized. Sometimes. When I need to be somewhere that isn't. Kang Jun Seo's life. The intimacy of the space suddenly felt overwhelming. This small apartment revealed more about him than his massive mansion ever had. Jun Seo removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. Without the formal armor, he looked younger. More human. You should rest, he said, gesturing to the bedroom. Take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch. I'm too wired to sleep, Azira admitted. Me too. He moved to the kitchen, opening a cabinet. Tea? The normalcy of the question made her smile despite everything. Yes, please. While the water boiled, Jun Seo made several calls, speaking in quick, hushed Korean. Azira caught fragments, orders for increased security at the hospital, instructions to investigate Hyun's movements, demands for information about who else might know about Jin Woo's connection to her. When he finished, he brought 2 steaming cups to the small living room table. My people will monitor the situation, he said, sitting across from her. For now, we wait. Azira wrapped her hands around the warm cup. There's something I need to show you. She pulled out her phone and opened her email, scrolling to find a specific message before handing it to him. Jin Woo sent this 3 days ago. I haven't had a chance to really look at it yet. Jun Seo took the phone. The email contained an attached document, scanned pages of what appeared to be old business records, handwritten notes, and several photographs. As he scrolled through them, his face grew increasingly tense. These are partnership agreements, he said. Between my father and Jung Hyun from 20 years ago. Before they became enemies. Keep going, Azira urged. The next pages showed shipping manifests with certain items circled in red ink. Notes in the margins questioned discrepancies in the numbers. My father was investigating something, Jun Seo murmured. Shipments that didn't match the official records. The final pages were the most disturbing, photographs of what appeared to be people being loaded into containers at the Incheon port. The images were grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough to see what was happening. Human trafficking, Jun Seo said, his voice hollow. Hyun was using my father's shipping business to move people. And your father found out, Azira added softly. These photos are dated 2 weeks before he died. Jun Seo looked up, realization dawning. This is why he was killed. He discovered what Hyun was doing and was going to expose it. And now the same people are after us because Jin Woo finally shared this evidence. Jun Seo set the phone down, running a hand through his hair. 15 years. For 15 years I've been looking for the truth, and it was right there all along. I know you're wondering if they'll make it out alive, and if they'll finally break down those walls between them. This story is getting intense, right? If you're enjoying the journey, please hit that subscribe button right now. It really helps the channel, and you'll never miss another story. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now, back to our cornered couple. Outside, rain began to fall. The soft patter against the windows filled the silence as they both processed what they'd discovered. What happened after your father died? Azira asked quietly. Jun Seo's eyes remained fixed on some distant point. I was 19. Still in university. Not ready to run an organization. But I had no choice. You had to become someone else. I had to become whatever was necessary to survive. He looked at her then. The first week, 3 different factions tried to take over. 2 of my father's captains thought I was too young, too weak. They moved against me. What did you do? What I had to. His voice was flat. I learned quickly that in this world, being feared is safer than being liked. So I became someone people feared. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. And you? He asked. You said your grandfather raised you. What happened to your parents? Azira set down her tea. Car accident when I was 7. My mother died instantly. My father hung on for a few days in the hospital. I'm sorry. My grandfather took me in. He was tough. A military man through and through. Not really equipped to raise a little girl. But he tried. He taught you not to show fear, Junesio observed. He taught me that fear doesn't help anything. That you face what comes and deal with it. She smiled faintly. I wasn't an easy child. Always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. After my parents died, I got angry. Started fighting at school. My grandfather could have crushed that spirit, but instead, he channeled it. Into what? Self-reliance. Problem solving. Standing my ground. She looked at him directly. The same things you had to learn, I imagine. Just under different circumstances. I didn't choose to be feared, Junesio said softly. But I learned that fear keeps you alive. Does it? She challenged gently. Or does it just keep you alone? The question hung between them, honest in a way few people had ever been with him. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was getting closer. When people look at me, Junesio said after a long moment, they see the chairman. The power. The danger. No one looks past that. I do, Azira said simply. Their eyes met across the small table. Something shifted in the air between them. Why? He asked. Because I know what it's like to wear a mask so long you forget it's not your face. Azira reached across the table, slowly enough that he could pull away if he wanted to. When he didn't, she placed her hand over his. It was such a simple gesture. Skin against skin. But for someone who had been untouchable for so long, it felt monumental. Junesio looked at their joined hands, then back to her face. For once, his eyes didn't look like winter. They looked like the sky after a storm, still dark, but with the promise of clearing. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Neither wanting to break it. Then his phone rang. Reluctantly, he pulled his hand away to answer it. Yes? His expression changed immediately. When? Is he stable? We'll be there. He hung up, looking at Azira with urgency. Jinwoo is awake. He's asking for both of us. Azira stood quickly. We have to go. It could be a trap, Junesio warned, already reaching for his jacket. Hyun's people could be watching the hospital, waiting for us to return. I don't care. If Jinwoo is awake, this might be our only chance to learn the whole truth. As they prepared to leave, Junesio's phone buzzed with a text. He looked at it, his face going pale. What is it? Azira asked. He showed her the screen. A message from Sung-ho. Traitor in organization. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. The hospital's loading dock was quiet at 5 a.m. A single security guard dozed in his booth while early morning deliveries waited to be processed. Junesio and Azira slipped through a service entrance, sticking to shadows. Stay close, Junesio whispered, leading the way through dim corridors. After Sung-ho's warning text, they'd agreed not to contact anyone. No security team. No backup. Just the two of them, trusting only each other. How do we know Jinwoo is really awake? Azira asked quietly. What if it's a trap? We don't, Junesio admitted. But if he is awake, we need to hear what he knows. They took the service elevator to avoid cameras in the main lobby. When the doors opened on the ICU floor, they paused, checking for signs of Hyun's men or anyone watching. The hallway was empty except for a nurse at the far end. Wait here, Jun Seo said, approaching the nurse's station. He spoke briefly with a nurse, who nodded and pointed down the hall. When he returned to Azira, his face was grim. Jin Woo is awake but weak. The nurse says he's been asking for us repeatedly. And Sung-ho's men? Gone. All of them. Jun Seo's jaw tightened. The nurse said they left about an hour ago. Claimed they were called away on urgent business. The traitor, Azira whispered. They moved cautiously to Jin Woo's room. The old man lay in bed, looking even smaller and more fragile than before. But his eyes were open, alert with recognition when they entered. Azira, he said, voice barely audible. Jun Seo. You came. Together. Jun Seo closed the door behind them, positioning himself where he could see both Jin Woo and the hallway through the small window. We're here, Azira said, taking Jin Woo's hand. Who did this to you? Hyun's people. Jin Woo's breathing was labored. They wanted the documents. The proof. We saw the evidence you sent, Jun Seo said, stepping closer. About my father. About the trafficking. Jin Woo nodded weakly. That's only part of it. The reason. He paused, struggling for breath. The reason I've stayed hidden all these years. The reason your father was killed. It goes deeper. Tell us, Azira urged gently. Jin Woo looked between them, something like wonder in his tired eyes. You two. Together. Just as it should be. Jun Seo frowned. What do you mean? Your father, Jin Woo said, turning to Jun Seo, and her grandfather. They were blood brothers. The words hung in the air. Azira's hand tightened around Jin Woo's. That's not possible, Jun Seo said. My father was Korean. Her grandfather was American. Half-brothers, Jin Woo clarified. Same mother. Different fathers. During the war, many Korean women had relationships with American soldiers. Some by choice. Some. He trailed off. My grandfather never mentioned having a Korean half-brother, Azira said. He didn't know. Not until much later. Jin Woo's voice grew stronger with urgency. Your grandmother, Jun Seo, she was pregnant when the American soldier left. She later married a Korean man who raised your father as his own. The truth was hidden to protect everyone. So my grandfather and Jun Seo's father were half-brothers, Azira said slowly. Which makes us distant cousins, Jin Woo confirmed. Family. Jun Seo stepped back, struggling to process this revelation. Why keep this secret? Why would my father never tell me? Because it was dangerous, Jin Woo said. When your father discovered what Hyun was doing with the shipping containers, he reached out to James, Azira's grandfather. They had reconnected years earlier, after learning they were brothers. James had connections in American law enforcement. Together, they were gathering evidence to bring down Hyun's trafficking operation. And that's why my father was killed, Jun Seo said, the pieces finally fitting together. Yes. Hyun discovered their plan. He murdered your father and tried to eliminate all evidence of the family connection. He feared American involvement, international attention. But why target us now? Azira asked. After 15 years? Because the evidence still exists, Jin Woo said. All of it. I've kept it hidden. And because Hyun fears history repeating itself. You two, working together, just like your father and grandfather did. Jin Woo reached for Jun Seo's hand, bringing it together with Azira's. Look at your eyes. Both of you. The same eyes. Jun Seo turned to Azira, really looking at her eyes for the first time. They were the same unusual shade as his, not quite brown, not quite gray. Eyes that people had called cold. Eyes like winter. It's a family trait, Jin Woo said softly. Your grandmother's eyes. Everyone always said they could see through people. Too perceptive. Too knowing. All this time, Azira whispered, I've been looking for answers about my family, and you were right here. For a moment, the room was silent except for the beeping of machines and Jinwoo's labored breathing. The evidence, Junesio finally said. Where is it? Hidden. Safe deposit box. Seoul National Bank. Jinwoo fumbled weakly with the hospital gown, pulling out a key on a chain around his neck. Everything you need. Enough to destroy Hyun. And... He looked at Juneseo with sadness, enough to implicate parts of your organization that continued the business after your father died. Juneseo's face hardened. Who? Before Jinwoo could answer, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Excuse me, visiting hours haven't started yet. How did you get in here? Juneseo turned to respond, then froze. The nurse was one of Hyun's men. He'd seen him outside the hospital earlier. Get down. Juneseo shouted, lunging toward Azira just as the man pulled a gun from his pocket. The first shot went wide, shattering a water pitcher. Juneseo tackled Azira to the floor as a second bullet thudded into the wall above them. Alarms began blaring as real hospital staff responded to the gunshots. The fake nurse cursed, backing into the hallway as people began shouting. We need to move, Juneseo said urgently, helping Azira up. More will be coming. The evidence, Jinwoo gasped, pressing the key into Azira's hand. Take it. Before Hyun destroys everything. We're not leaving you, Azira insisted. You must. Go. Use the evidence. Finish what your father started. Juneseo peered into the hallway. Security's coming. But Hyun's men will be, too. We need to decide now. He looked at the evidence key in Azira's hand, then at Jinwoo, then at the chaos building in the hospital. In that moment, he faced the most important choice of his life, continue the cycle of violence and power his father's death had launched him into, or risk everything for truth and justice. For 15 years, he'd built walls around himself, becoming the cold, feared chairman everyone expected. For 15 years, he'd focused on power as protection, never considering there might be another way. Now, looking at Azira, at family he never knew he had, he saw another path. We're going to the bank, he said firmly. We'll get the evidence and take it to authorities I trust. We'll expose everything. Hyun. The trafficking. All of it. But your organization. Azira started. Parts of it are corrupt. Have been since my father died. His eyes were clear, determined. I'd rather burn it all down and start clean than continue what Hyun started. Jinwoo smiled weakly. Your father would be proud. Shouting in the hallway grew louder. They could hear running footsteps approaching. We need to go. Now. Juneseo grabbed Azira's hand. They were halfway to the door when they heard it, the distinct sound of a gun being cocked. Young Hyun himself stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. Going somewhere? The older man smiled coldly. After all these years, the son of Kang Min-ho and the granddaughter of James Thorne, together at last. How convenient. Juneseo stepped in front of Azira. This ends now, Hyun. I agree. Hyun raised his gun. It ends with you. The world seemed to slow down. Juneseo tensed, preparing to launch himself at Hyun. Azira gripped the evidence key tightly. And then Jinwoo, with strength no one knew he still possessed, ripped out his 4 and lunged from the bed. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. Jinwoo staggered, blood blooming across his hospital gown as he collapsed against Hyun, knocking the older man off balance. Run. Jinwoo gasped, his eyes locking with Juneseo's one last time. Go. Chaos erupted. Juneseo grabbed Azira, pulling her toward the window as more shots rang out behind them. Cherry blossoms drifted past the hospital window like pink snow. 3 months had passed since that terrible night when bullets flew and lives hung in the balance. Jin Woo sat in a wheelchair by the window, watching the blossoms fall. He was thin and moved with obvious pain, but his eyes were alert. Alive. The doctors say I can leave next week, he told Azira as she arranged fresh flowers by his bedside. Finally. About time, she smiled. Your room at the mansion is ready whenever you are. Jun Seo entered, carrying a paper bag. I brought those hotteok you like, he said, handing the warm sweet pancakes to Jin Woo. From the street vendor near Gwangwaman. Jin Woo accepted them gratefully. You too spoil an old man. So much had changed in 3 months. After escaping the hospital that night, Jun Seo and Azira had retrieved the evidence from Jin Woo's safe deposit box. The documents proved beyond doubt that Jung Hyun had orchestrated human trafficking operations for decades, and had Jun Seo's father killed when he discovered the truth. Instead of seeking revenge, Jun Seo had made a choice that shocked everyone. He went to the authorities. With Azira by his side, he turned state's witness against both the Hyun organization and the corrupt members of his own. In exchange for full cooperation, he received immunity, though he had to surrender most of his business holdings and assets. The Hyun organization was dismantled. Jung Hyun himself was arrested trying to flee the country. And several of Jun Seo's own captains, the ones who had continued the trafficking after his father's death, now faced lengthy prison sentences. Have you seen the news? Jin Woo asked, turning up the volume on the hospital TV. They've arrested 3 more shipping officials connected to Hyun. The whole network is coming down. Jun Seo nodded. Good. And what about Sung Ho? Jin Woo asked carefully. Any word? Still missing, Jun Seo said, his face hardening slightly. Sung Ho had disappeared the night of the hospital shooting. Whether he was the traitor or had been taken by Hyun's people, they still didn't know. He'll turn up eventually, Azira said, placing a gentle hand on Jun Seo's arm. They always do. As they prepared to leave, a nurse poked her head in. Miss Thorne? The international patient from Chicago has arrived. They're asking for you. Azira nodded. I'll be right there. To Jin Woo, she said, rest up. I'll be back tomorrow to help with your physical therapy. In the hallway, Jun Seo walked with her toward the elevator. How's the new job going? He asked. Azira smiled. I like it. Turns out my experience with difficult rich people is perfect for handling international patients. After everything settled, Severance Hospital had offered Azira a position as international patient liaison. Her language skills and calm efficiency made her perfect for the role. And it meant she could stay in Korea. Will you be home for dinner? She asked as they reached the elevator. Home. The Hanam-dong mansion. It was the one asset Jun Seo had managed to keep, mainly because he'd immediately donated it to be converted into a recovery center for trafficking victims. Construction would begin next month. Until then, the 3 of them lived there together, Jun Seo, Azira, and soon Jin Woo. I'll be there, Jun Seo promised. I have one more meeting with the lawyers, then I'm free. Don't forget we're hosting the foundation board tomorrow, she reminded him. They want to finalize the plans for the East Wing renovation. He nodded. I'll be ready. They parted with a simple touch of hands, a small gesture that meant everything between them. That evening, as the sun set over Seoul, Jun Seo and Azira walked through the mansion gardens. Spring had transformed the space, bringing color and life to what had been dormant all winter. It's hard to believe how much has changed, Azira said, looking up at the mansion. 3 months ago, this place felt like a museum. Cold. Empty. And now? Now it feels like it has a purpose. Like it's waking up. They stopped by a small pond where koi fish swam lazily. The evening air was cool but pleasant. Do you ever regret it? Azira asked. Giving up your empire? All that power? Jun Seo considered the question. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, he admitted. Knowing exactly who I was and what was expected of me. Being the chairman was straightforward. And now? Now I'm figuring it out day by day. Building something new. He turned to face her. Something better. Something that doesn't require winter to survive. Azira studied his face in the fading light. Gently, she reached up and touched his cheek. 3 months ago, such a gesture would have been unthinkable. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Your eyes aren't winter anymore, she said softly. They're early spring. Still cool, but with the promise of warmth. He covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press a kiss against her palm. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully. First as reluctant allies, then as family discovering their shared history, and finally as something deeper. Something neither had expected to find. I never thought I'd stay in Korea, Azira said as they resumed walking. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Even with a cousin who used to be a mafia boss. She laughed. Especially with him. They reached the mansion's main entrance. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed. Where once there were only expensive art pieces and impersonal decorations, now family photos lined the walls. The centerpiece was a restored photograph of 2 young men in military uniforms, one Korean, one American, arms around each other's shoulders. Juneseo's father and Azira's grandfather. Brothers separated by war and circumstance, but connected by blood. Next to it hung a newer photo. Juneseo, Azira, and Jinwoo, taken just last month during a rare moment of celebration. 3 people brought together by a shared past, now facing the future together. What do you think they would say? Juneseo asked, looking at the old photograph. If they could see us now? Azira slipped her hand into his. I think they'd be proud. I think they'd say we finished what they started. As the last light of day faded, they stood together in the no longer silent mansion, hands intertwined, the winter finally giving way to spring. And that's how a man feared by everyone found the one person who could see past his winter. It wasn't romance that saved him, it was finding family, finding truth, and choosing to be more than his past. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button right now. I share stories like this every week, and I'd love for you to join our storytelling family. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you thought of Juneseo and Azira's journey. Until next time, remember that even the coldest winter eventually gives way to spring.